Hello everyone, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack, and this is a very rare Fiat 130 Berliner. Now this car is very special. It was the very first time, and the last time, that Fiat ever tried to go toe-to-toe with Mercedes and BMW. A little bit of a spoiler alert here, unfortunately it failed. It did have some good stuff going for it though. It had independent suspension all round, McPherson struts at the front, a Chapman type setup at the rear, had a 5-speed box. Also, it had a the original version, this is a 3.2, the original one had a 2.8 litre V6 engine designed by none other than Aurelio Lampredi. So the famous, incredible designer who also did the twin cam engine. So on paper, it should have done pretty well. And actually, I was really surprised at the level of quality of this feels. The way the handles open, the weight of the door, the way it closes. Trust me, this is no ordinary Fiat. Yet, despite the heritage of the engine and the supposedly great handling, this really was a bit of a flop. If you think that between this and the coupe, only 19,000 were sold. Compare that to BMW with the E3. 190,000 of those were sold in roughly the same period as this. And if you look at the Mercedes W114, another competitor, 1.8 million of those were made over its production cycle. Let's find out why this didn't make it. So this one has, thankfully, the ZF 5-speed box. It was also available with an auto. I think it was a 3-speed Borg-Warner auto, which is rather horrible. But in the UK, I think hardly any of these are sold at all. But only 2 were sold with the manual gearbox. And this is a really special car because Alex from Alex Duke Motorsport, do go and have a look at his website, looks after Italian cars of this era. Well, anyway, Alex found this with only, where's the 36,000 kilometers on the clock. It was a French car, kept in Paris, in a garage for most of its life. So this is an absolutely lovely example. And as I said, it is a manual. And this is such an interesting car. That engine sounds so characterful, that V6. Now, some people said at the time that because it was designed by the same person who did the Ferrari V6, the Aurelio Lampredi, who also did the V6 used in the Fiat Dinos, that it was the same engine. Just being told by Alex, it's got quite a lot of differences, really. It does have a cast iron bottom end, aluminium top end. But back to the Fiat 130. So they said it was a good handler, and it's got a nice V6 engine. So what went wrong? Is it the quality? Well, no, I've shown you just earlier, this feels really well made. It's absurdly comfortable. Again, road tests of the time complained about the ride. I don't understand it. This is a totally standard car. And it rides lovely. It's got a really cushioned feeling. It is an absolute delight. The interior feels pretty nice. In actual fact, I would go as far as to say that the interior is probably, well, it's definitely plusher than it was on the Mercs and BMWs of the time, and it doesn't really feel any less well built. Just trying to see, I mean, there is some plastic there in the dash, and the first series, the 2.8, had a more basic layout. When the coupe came out, it had a different interior, and when they upgraded to the 3.2 version, the coupe engine, on the Berliner as well, then essentially they also got the upgraded interior. But these Vela seats are just lovely. They're just like armchairs, and it does feel like a quality product. the moment you touch that throttle, it responds. It also sounds really, really good. It does. I think they said at the time, one of the big issues about this, it weighed 1,600 kilos. So really, trust me, Fiat did make a quality car at that point in time. And it felt a little bit underpowered, especially with the 2.8 litre versions. But this one, to me, does not feel underpowered. The 3.2, still a bit down on power. I think the original 2.8 was 140 horsepower, so well down on the BMW 2800, which had 170 horsepower. When this came out, 3.2, 160 horsepower, got a bit closer, but by then you had the 3.2, and the BMW on that put out, I think, 194 horsepower. And that's really bizarre, because Italian cars in general, and Fiats and so on, one of the things they always seem to do better than anyone else around this time was the engines. They always put out a little bit more power. And they had the Dino V6 engine, designed by the same person who made this, which out of a 2 litre made 160 horsepower. So why could they only squeeze, 180 horsepower out of this? Discuss that a little bit more in a moment, but let me tell you a few more things of what it's like to drive this. Now, the steering wheel is absolutely massive. I think this is the biggest steering wheel I have absolutely ever come across. You have quite a commanding view of the road. The glass house is so thin, the pillars, they're practically non-existent, and this is quite a big car. There's quite a lot of space in here, front and back. The ride is fantastic. What were you complaining about, Autocar, in the 1960s? I have no idea. It rides brilliantly. I mean, honestly, like limo type ride on this it's amazing. The steering is very slow, but again, it is that kind of car, right, that you're just going to be piloting. Driving position for an Italian car is excellent. It doesn't suffer, for me anyway, with that sort of really long arm, scrunched up legs. There's plenty of room here in the pedal box, although where my foot goes onto the accelerator, again, the brakes are really close, and I have to kind of dangle my foot to the left slightly so I don't touch the brake pedal at the same time. And this isn't the sort of car in which you'd be heel and toeing, so why they put them so close together, absolutely don't know. Let me just close the window, because another issue supposedly was that it was a bit too noisy, and that I can understand. I think the engine, although to us, to petrol head, it sounds nice, I think for someone who wanted a sort of upper executive car, probably would be start to get a bit tiresome. It's a little bit too present if you'd want to use this day in, day out, and you wanted just ultimate comfort. Seems to handle pretty well. Haven't thrown it around. I mean, it is pretty soft, but it feels quite well balanced between front and back. Not too bad through that corner at a sort of medium speed. There's decent feedback, even though the steering is quite light. So far, all pretty good, really. I think the two major issues are the lack of power for the engine, for the displacement, the price of the car. This was very expensive when it was new, and perhaps the ultimate refinement in terms of noise, engine noise more generally, but it is hugely comfortable. Altogether, it feels quite live for a big car. It's quite crisp in the corners. Now, the cabin is pretty well laid out. You can see everything is there, pretty clear to see. There are a few toggle switches there. The heating is at the bottom. It's a bit of a reach, perhaps. There's a clock which is almost invisible and totally in the wrong place, but the ergonomics are a little bit funny in some ways, I suppose. But on the whole, it's hard to understand why it wasn't more successful. Okay, there was these criticisms made about the fact that the engine was a bit too present, perhaps, the engine noise problem wasn't fast enough. But to me, it feels like a really good driving car, and one can't help but think that perhaps Fiat were just hobbled by the badge. But certainly after this, they never attempted to make a quality car like this under their own badge. Once they had Alfa and Lancia, they made other, let's say, mostly unsuccessful attempts. But this was the first and only Fiat that tried to have a go at the sort of luxury, at the luxury side of things. And it's a real shame that it didn't make it, because the basis is really rather good. The looks, perhaps, is that why it didn't succeed? Well, I don't know. From this standpoint, okay, it's a bit squared off, but many cars at that time were. If you look at BMWs at the time, they're not that different in design to this. To me now, it looks like quite a handsome car. It's definitely got presence. I don't think that looks were the problem. Now, the gearbox is a little bit bulky, this ZF unit is, but compared to like some of the modern units, I actually I sort of quite enjoy it, really. One can't help but wonder what would have happened if Fiat had had more success with this car, because I don't know, I think it's quite promising, certainly from the, you know, from the future point of view in which we are now. It's a very endearing car, it seems well made, it's very nice to drive, so it's just a shame they didn't have more success. I wonder what they could have achieved if they really tried. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have a car that you want me to do a review on, please do get in touch. I'd love to do a 124 as well. Thank you and see you soon.